Hello, lovely Soberful listeners. It's Veronica, and I am here today to talk to you about a subject that I think is the most vital thing that you need to understand about how sobriety works. That sobriety is just a shift in perception. I am going to use as an aid a book that I love that really illustrates this. And it's called The Obstacle is the Way, The Timeless Art of Turning Trials into Triumph by Ryan Holiday. And it's really, what he does is he really pulls from the Greek philosophers, from particularly Stoicism. And every so often I'll come across a book that just is so aligned with what I teach about sobriety. And this book is one of them. And I just find that so fascinating, right? That this stuff, humans were talking and thinking about perception thousands of years ago. Even though their cultures were very different from ours, they were thinking about the same things and having the same awakenings and realizations that we were today. That just kind of blows my mind. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I really urge you to listen to all this episode, because I hope, and it's my take, it may not necessarily be the way other people see it, but this is my take on what you really have to understand about sobriety to get sober and to stay sober. If you are listening to this or watching this on YouTube, please give us a follow, a like, a comment. Really helps with the show kind of getting boosted and all of that kind of stuff. I'd appreciate it. Thank you very much. Okay. So all sobriety is a shift in perception. And what that means is we see everything differently. Everything. That's all sobriety is. Now, that sounds like a small thing, but it's a massive, fundamentally life-changing thing. And I'm going to talk about what that means to have a shift in perception. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about how to get it. But let me just kind of plug this. If you want to get it, you need to check out the Soberful method. It's a digital program that I have, and I lay out all of the tools to be able to have this internal shift. And that's what a shift in perception is. It is an internal rearrangement. And the result of that internal rearrangement is that all of a sudden we see everything differently. And let me give you an example of this. When I stopped drinking at 27 years old, I believed this was a fact, that you could not have fun or enjoy yourself or hang out with friends or relax and unwind without alcohol. And I thought a life without alcohol meant a life of missing out, lacking, and it being very dull, boring, and grey. I believed that. Now, that is just a perception. It's just a way of seeing things. I remember dating this guy. I really liked him. And we met at university. There's a lot of drinking at university, and then he's in London. We would go to the student union bar every day. So lots of drinking. And I remember one weekend we were together and we were spending the weekend together. And on the Friday night, we went out with our student friends and we were drinking. The next morning, he was like, so what do you want to do? And I'm like, looking at him thinking, well, we're going to go to the pub, right? We have the whole weekend. We're going to go to the pub for lunch and we'll just stay there all day, right? Like, what? And I was like, well, go to the pub. And he kind of looked at me with like, but we're in London and there is like a million fantastic things we could do. There's museums, there's art galleries, there's the river, there's history. I mean, it's just endless. And I was like, yeah, in theory, I want to do those things, but is there drinking involved? Where is the drinking in the history, in the museum, in the art gallery bit? I need to know where the drinking bit is. And in that moment, do you have these moments sometimes where you just sort of see yourself and kind of go, oh God? I kind of saw myself in his eyes, in that my world was so small. It was so small. Alcohol makes your world so small that all I could think was that you go to a pub. Needless to say, that relationship didn't last very long. But that is a really good example of perception. I perceived socializing, having fun, free time had to be around alcohol consumption. I wonder if you have felt the same, if you saw it like that too. I just couldn't imagine. Like, I literally, there I was in one of the greatest cities in the world with everything on my doorstep, and I couldn't conceive of anything better to do than going down to the local pub. It's a way of seeing the world. Now, when I stopped drinking, I thought that was the worst thing ever. I was going to miss out, all that kind of stuff. Again, that's a perception. I'm coming up to 25 years of sobriety in May. I simply could not be sober this long if I still saw things that way. Now, the world is not going to change. Your mum's not going to change, your neighbor's not going to change, your partner's not going to change, alcohol's always going to be there, it's not going to change. But how you see everything is going to transform. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not going to happen by the end of the week. You can't see the process happening, but one day you realize everything has changed. And this happened to me. I was maybe 18 months sober-ish, something like that. I'd been going out for a while. Like, I didn't really go out the first, I want to say 10 to 11 months of my sobriety. Like, I didn't go out to a bar or a club or a gig or anything like that. I was too scared. But I'd started going out. I had some friends I went out with, some sober, some who had a drink or two. But like, because I was in my 20s, right? So going out to, I like to dance, going out to a nightclub, going out to see live music. And I remember being out and watching a band and like just dancing my ass off. I love to dance. Like, I really, truly love to dance. Dancing my ass off, like, not, it was song after song after song. Like, couldn't get off the dance floor because the next song, I loved each song, right? Red in the face, going and getting just like a pint of ice water because I was so hot and just having a great time. And I had that moment and I looked around, I could see some of the people who I was with who were drinking, who were just a bit messy, you know how drinking gets a bit messy. One person was having an inane conversation with someone, like, it just, and I had this moment where I went, oh, I'm having more fun than they are. And it was in that moment I realized everything is different. And it was in that moment it shifted without me sort of realizing, but that was the moment I saw it. I saw everything differently. I was out, it was like Saturday night, it was midnight, I was stone cold sober, had danced solidly for 3 or 4 hours. I'd hardly spent any money because I wasn't buying alcohol. I'd laughed, I'd connected, I'd had an amazing time, much, much better than I'd ever had drinking. And I saw it. And my perception of everything shifted, and it just carries on. We just begin to see things differently. So I want you to know, wherever you are in your sober journey, and especially if you're struggling, if you're trudging, if it feels really, really hard, if you're stopping and starting, what the work is shifting your perception, because you cannot stay sober if you still feel that alcohol is the best way to enjoy yourself, and you'll be missing out if you don't do that. You can't. It's impossible because it feels awful. That feels awful. Who wants to do that? That's terrible. Nobody wants to do that. Okay, so I'm going to read you something from this book, The Obstacle is the Way, because I just love it. This is from part 1, chapter 1, and the title is Perception. What is perception? It's how we see and understand what occurs around us and what we decide those events will mean. Our perceptions can be a source of strength or of great weakness. If we are emotional, subjective, and short-sighted, we will only add to our troubles. It takes skill and discipline to bat away the pests of bad perceptions, to separate reliable signals from deceptive ones, to filter out prejudice, expectation, and fear. But it's worth it, for what's left is truth. There is so much to unpack there. And I want to tell you, this is the work I do. This is what I do. This is when I talk about emotional sobriety, what I'm talking about is teaching the mechanical process to be able to do that, to be able to see things differently, to see truth. Now, I've talked about this in a few places, but I'm going to talk about it here because my experience has been the core work we have to do with emotional sobriety is to work on our resentments and activating events. They're the same thing. Resentment is just a way of seeing something. That's all it is. There is an event, okay? There's an event, something happens. Doesn't matter what it is, but you see it in a certain way and you tell yourself a story about that event. And the story will be very familiar to you because you do it over and over. The story could be, it's not fair. It could be, that happened because I'm not good enough. Could be, why does nothing ever go right for me? I'm not liked. People don't like me. It might be, I'll be rejected. It might be all sorts of variations of that. Big one is other people need to behave the way that I want them to behave. Other people need to do what I want them to do. That is all perception. It's how we see things. So there is an event, we see it a certain way, and we tell ourselves a story about what's going on. But that story is based on emotions, subjective analysis, expectations, prejudice, fear. And then there's a consequence for that story. And I'm going to tell you what typically is the consequence for that story is usually drinking. We make an interpretation about an event in a way that sets us up to justify and rationalize to ourselves why we are allowed to have a drink. That's what resentments are. They're the free drunk. When we have a drink problem, we want to drink and we want it to be somebody else's fault. There is an event, something happens. I don't like that somebody spoke to me, or this happened or that happened. It wasn't fair. I was mistreated. This always happens to me. I'm not good enough. To hell with it. I deserve to have a drink. And we just get stuck in that. And I want to tell you how you see things. If you are making those interpretations, and those interpretations are feelings, right? It's just really familiar feelings. What was very familiar to me was not feeling good enough, not feeling adequate, not feeling worthy. I couldn't have told you in words that's how I felt, but I felt that in my body. Like, I could interpret most of what happened around me to mean that. It doesn't matter, right? If something happened at work, something happened with my friends, something happened, I would always come to the conclusion that it was something that had something to do with me not being worthy and good enough. And that's how I saw the world. It's a pair of glasses. It literally is a pair of glasses. You just see the world that way. And we believe that is a fact. We believe it's a fact. We believe how we see things is how they are. And I want you to understand this core truth. Nothing could be further from the truth. How you see things is not necessarily how they are. How you see things is through your filter system of perception. And your filter system of perception is rooted in your limiting beliefs that you have about yourself. So we have to change it. This is another quote from the book. There is no good or bad without us. There is only perception. There is an event itself and the story we tell ourselves about what it means. That's what I read that, like it's highlighted. I've got like sticky notes. I've got all the things because I'm like, oh my God, that is what I've been teaching my clients for 20 years. And it's tricky, right? I'm going to tell you, we want to hold on to our stories. We don't want to change. We want everyone else to. It's much easier for me if you're the one who's wrong and you change and then I feel better. That's easier. And it doesn't work like that. We tell ourselves a story about the events that happen. That's the work of emotional sobriety. And that's the bit that has to change because it will keep you stuck. It will keep you drunk and it will prevent you from growing. And the beautiful gift of sobriety is that it allows you to grow. Growth is such a gift. It's one of the 5 pillars of sobriety. 5 pillars of sobriety are movement, balance, connection, process, and growth. As long as you have breath in your body, you are being called to grow. Growth is the point of life. It's the juice of life. It's why you're here. But if you're telling yourself a story that keeps you stuck in repeat with the same thoughts and feelings and the same outcome, you'll never grow beyond that. This is why this work is so much more than just stopping drinking. It is so much more than that. This is from the book. Just because your mind tells you that something is awful or evil or unplanned or otherwise negative doesn't mean you have to agree. Just because other people say that something is hopeless or crazy or broken to pieces doesn't mean it is. We decide what story to tell ourselves or whether we will tell one at all. Welcome to the power of perception. Applicable in each and every situation, impossible to obstruct, it can only be relinquished. And that is your decision. This is about you getting your power back. The reason that we do this work so we can see things differently is so that you get your power back. You decide the story to tell yourself. Now, I want to give you an example of this. This is one I always give in my groups because this is exactly how I used to be. Chip and I have spoken a lot about this on the podcast, how we used to be chronic people pleasers. People pleasing is when faulty belief, faulty perception, I needed you to like me for me to feel good. It really worried me. Well, not worried me. It made me feel absolutely miserable and uncomfortable if you didn't like me, if I thought you didn't like me. So I would work very hard at trying to get you to like me and approve of me, which is a losing game because you are tying yourself up like a pretzel, trying to get that approval and get that kind of, it's like almost like how, I don't want to say nourishment. It was like I needed it, to feel okay. And so you're constantly filled with anxiety and second guessing things, and it's exhausting living that way. I used to be the kind of person who would walk into my office on a Monday morning, back in the day when I worked in a large office, like an open plan office, lots of people, lots of desks. And I'd walk in and I'd see the first person and I'd go, "Oh, hi, Tracy. How was your weekend?" And Tracy would be tapping away at her computer and she'd go, "Yeah, it was fine, thanks." What I would do, is exactly what's in this book. There's no good or bad without, there's only perception. So Tracy is obviously not had a good weekend and is not happy, right? That's the event. I would immediately, my perception was I had done something to make Tracy unhappy. That Tracy's response must have something to do with something I've done. And Tracy no longer likes me and definitely doesn't approve of me. And that I used to feel desperate. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I know a lot of people are going to relate to this. It would just make me feel like I would then spend all day worrying about it. About Tracy, I try and do I'd later on I'd be like, "Oh, do you want me to, I'll get you, do you want a coffee? I'll get a coffee for you." I just try and do little things to try and get that, get nice, approving Tracy back again so all could be well in my world. That is a horrible way to live. It's horrible. And I want to tell you, this is all that puts weight on the drinking end. This puts weight on the drinking end because it's a faulty perception. It's not true. It's all the things. So after I had done this work, I fundamentally changed. After I'd done the work of emotional sobriety, I'll explain what that is in a second. And I'd had this internal shift inside of me. I just began to see things differently. Like the story I told you about going out and just realizing I was having more fun sober. And my new story was, it's like going out and partying and dancing is better sober. Like my story changed, my perception changed. I changed. So same scenario, I'd walk into the office Monday morning. I'd be like, "Hi, Tracy, how's your weekend?" And she'd be like, "Yeah, it was fine, thanks." My next thought would be, "I wonder what's up with Tracy." And I'd go about my day and I wouldn't think about it. That's it. Same scenario, completely different perception, completely different story, completely different consequences and outcomes. Isn't that incredible? And again, that sounds like a small thing, but I do that with everybody I met, like all the time. I mean, it's just a horrible way to live. So, if Tracy has a concern or problem, I'm just going to trust that Tracy's an adult and she'll come and address it with me. And if she doesn't, I'm just going to assume there's, I don't know, a million things that could be going on with Tracy. Maybe she broke up with her boyfriend. I don't know. Maybe she doesn't feel well. Maybe she's asked for a raise and didn't get one. I don't know. There's a million things. And I'm going to tell you, if you relate to this, the responses that people give you are never personal. Now, this is the freedom. This is the freedom. Wayne Dyer talks about this. God rest his soul. We want to be free of the good and bad opinion of other people. I mean, of course, having the good opinion of other people is really, really lovely. Nobody wants people to have a bad opinion of us. But we want to get to a place where what we think about ourselves is the thing that matters the most. And I do not mean that we think that I'm like the greatest, the best ever. What I mean is that I just like myself and I'm comfortable in my own skin. And I have people that like me and I have people that love me, and I'm also not everybody's cup of tea. And all of that is okay because I like myself. I don't have to pretend to be something I'm not. I don't have to say things that I don't mean. I don't have to perform a song and dance to please you and get you to like and approve of me. I just don't have to do those things. And that is freedom. Because when we get the shift in perception, one of the big things that we realize, just like my little scenario there with our friend Tracy, is what other people do isn't personal. It's not about me. It's just not about me. So the Greeks knew this. I mean, it's just amazing, isn't it? Thousands of years ago, we haven't really changed that much. We've got different technology, but that's about it. The Greeks, this is from the book, the Greeks were clever, but beneath this particular quip is the fundamental notion that girds not just Stoic philosophy, but cognitive psychology. Perspective is everything. That is, when you can break apart something or look at it from some new angle, it loses its power over you. So we are giving our power away. I'm giving my power away to random Tracy in the office or whoever, whatever. You're just giving your power away. And that's why when we don't have any power, there's nothing left for us to hang our sobriety onto, right? This emotional sobriety is about reclaiming your power. The Greeks understood that we often choose the ominous explanation over the simple one to our detriment. That we are scared of obstacles because our perspective is wrong. That a simple shift in perspective can change our reaction entirely. And that's just, again, it's just so true. The little scenario there with Tracy in the office, like I would just pick the ominous explanation, which was, you are not liked. Like that's like was my biggest fear, right? That's the ominous perception over the simplest one, which is, I don't know, it's Monday morning. Maybe she didn't get a good night's sleep, right? It's really crazy. I'd love to know what you think about this. If you are identifying or relating to this, let me know in the comments below if you're watching it on YouTube, or you can comment on Instagram or whatever. So the book goes on to say, focusing exclusively on what is in our power magnifies and enhances our power. But every ounce of energy directed at things we can't actually influence is wasted, self-indulgent and self-destructive. So much power, ours and other people's, is frittered away in this manner. So one of the things that we learn when we get emotionally sober is about what's our side of the street and what's their side of the street. I believe there's a famous poem called Let Them, and a book as well. But that's what it's basically saying. There is your side of the street. Those are the things that you can influence and control. That is much smaller than you realize. There is the other side of the street, which is everybody else's responsibility to take care of. So I'm not responsible for other people's emotional experience. I'm responsible for showing up as an adult and being appropriate, but I'm not responsible for people's emotional response to that. I am responsible for my emotional experience. I am responsible for my perception and how I respond to the world. Now, there's outcomes that we can't control. We have to let go of the control of outcomes because there's just so many factors, right? All I can control is my response to the outcomes that happen in my life. I can make a decision to look at it one way, or I can make a decision to look at it another way. Now, I'm going to tell you, this took me a while. I needed like a strategy. Like I needed like how, because you can't think your way into this, is my experience, right? If you're listening to this and you're like, oh my God, yes, Veronica, like that's how I want to be. Like, I don't know anyone, to be honest, who's just magically changed their thinking and seen it differently. I mean, we can certainly work on it with our conscious mind, but this is what I did. This is the emotional sobriety practice. I have written out, as and when I get a resentment, I've done that pretty diligently for over 2 decades. Now, at the beginning, 22 years ago, whatever it was, I had resentments that would come up all the time. I was always misinterpreting events that happen around me. And I was frequently misinterpreting those events to tell a negative story about myself. And it took multiple times writing that out for me to see that differently. And for me to begin to go, you know what? Maybe it's not like that. It changed my relationships. It changed the relationship I have with my mother. It certainly changed my relationship I had with romance and dating, which was extremely toxic. I just created this internal shift inside of me so that I saw everything differently. I write out my fears and I ask myself, is this true? And my fears began to lose their power over me. And I began to see that I was just fueling my fears with irrational thoughts and stuff that just wasn't true. I began to dismantle the limiting beliefs that I had. Limiting beliefs that I had were, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy of being loved. And that's just not true. It's not true for you either. If you're listening to this and go, oh, I feel the same, I'm just going to tell you, hear it from me right here and now. It's not true for you either, my love. It's just not. It's a faulty perception you have based on interpretations you made of past events. That's why I began to dismantle that and change it into something that was just more helpful. That was more limiting beliefs are lies, empowering beliefs are truth. And then I write out a gratitude list. I write 10 things that I'm grateful for, because cultivating an attitude of gratitude is a perception, and it's just a much, much better way to live. And slowly but quickly over time, I just saw everything differently. It changed my whole life. And that's why I'm so passionate. You've heard me, I'm sure, if you've listened to me before, talk about emotional sobriety over and over and over. There was one more bit in this book that I want to read that just said something really interesting. Uncertainty and fear are relieved by authority. Training is authority. So the practice, that's what I teach my clients if you work with me, that the practice that I teach, that's training. And training is, when we train to do anything, repetition is involved. We have to repeat. And what that gives you is authority. What it gave me is authority over my internal life, my emotional life. That's what it gave me. It goes on to say it's a release valve. With enough exposure, you can adapt out those perfectly ordinary, even innate fears that are bred mostly from unfamiliarity. This is sobriety. What we need is self-mastery. We need emotional mastery, because with that, it's not just going to keep you sober. It's going to change your whole experience of life. You know, going back to alcohol just makes our life really, really small. It just makes it reduced, less than. It's the complete opposite of our perception, right? You know, fun, excitement, all of those things. I perceived alcohol delivered those. It didn't. It made my life so much smaller and limited and duller. And emotional sobriety is going to open it up into technicolor. And that's what I want for all of you. That's what is on offer if you do the work. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, there'll be a link below for the Soberful method, or you can go to my website, soberful.com, and find it. I'd love to know what your thoughts were about this if you have any questions, and we'll be back next week.